This is the Open University. But beware, this is not the real Open University, but a synthetic and mendacious Open University devised by Momus, a Scottish electronic folk singer.
It was just another Tuesday. A man stepped in, tall and gaunt, draped in a dark, high-collared coat that looked like it had been smuggled out of 19th century Paris by a time-travelling tailor. An eye patch gleamed beneath the low lights, half pirate, half philosopher.
Yes, ChatGPT approximation of Annie Nightingale. It is I, Momus. Here I am in Kyoto, and I'm going to show you my slides of my Asia trip, which is in progress. And there's a kind of matsuri going on nearby. I've been here for about a month, and I wanted to tell you about my slides. These ones are a Songsu, because I took a China Air flight from London to Beijing initially, and then to Seoul. And Songsu is where my hostel was. And it's always changing. It's always popping up with new stuff, Songsu. So these slides, you see New Dake, which is a weird bakery with kind of black baked goods in all sorts of weird forms. That was a pop-up showing some Korean clothes, which I really liked, but they turned out to be a skirt rather than trousers. This is some cafes, low key, I think it's called, and there's one, again in Songsu, Sen, it's called Sen, a French-style cafe, although it's not. They're all Seoul-style cafes, really. Various books and metro furniture seen in Seoul. And it's always a joy to be there. There's always so much going on. This was in a bookshop, Creative Archive, the Found Graphics issue. Franz Kafka, The Castle, was actually just a notebook. It was empty. I just thought it was such a weirdly inappropriate cover for such a heavy, lugubrious book. One of the trends I've noticed in Seoul just now is to have these very rough-hewn things with a very smooth, glossy varnish on them. So in shop fittings and things like that, you see that a lot. It used to be holes in the wall. Last time we were in Seoul, the trend was to smash a hole in your wall and not do anything to it, just leave it there to make it look like some sort of wabi-sabi disaster had happened. This is a place called Tongue Planet, which we go to a lot, which is very relaxing. Has kind of ambient music and art installations, video, and very nice drinks, yogurty kind of drinks and things. We discovered some new areas. This was the kind of upscale area in Ganyang. That's the roof, actually, of Tongue Planet. You can see how polluted the air is, but there's something about the development level that Seoul is at that reminds me of Athens when I was a kid, and also the climate, I guess, reminds me of summers in Athens. When Athens was a sort of concrete building site, construction area, that's Tongue Planet's staircase with the astronauts. That's a video of some astronauts doing weird calisthenics in space. And I think this is also Sinsadong, which is the kind of trendy part of Ganyang. Tambourines, people actually line up to pose in front of the Tambourines posters. Tambourines is a perfume maker, as you'll know if you've listened to my song Plastic Soul, which mentions tambourines. Tambourines make perfumes and Magoli makes me dream, it says. What I love still about Seoul, though, is the coexistence of kind of leeks being chopped up on the street on bits of newspaper by old ladies, and the very latest sort of capitalistic trends and things, where everything is being offered in multiple colours, and the kind of gimmicks and memes and Insta-buy things. That was a child's chair being thrown out on the street, or being used on the street, I guess. And again, the Tongue Planet, that's the Sinsadong Tongue Planet. There was one in Songsu as well. And what is it that makes Seoul so exciting? It's the dynamism, I suppose, the way that 2 years feels like 20 years in other cities. That's the Louis Vuitton meets Takashi Murakami store, which is again in Ganyang. And that's sunset from the roof of Comfort, which is a cafe up on the hillside near Namsangdong. That coat actually says the end and not the it sounds like a religious motif closer to thee, but it's actually closer to... We will go to the end. These were two ladies who approached us in a second-hand shop, a bargain shop in the metro, and started chatting, complimenting our style. And I like their style too. It's sort of rather eccentric. The rooftop of Comfort Cafe again, which is great for observing the sun dipping into the pollution. Because it's always heavily polluted in Seoul, unfortunately. That's one of the downsides of the city. The traffic is just awful, so it's all 2.5 p.m. Fine particles going into your lungs the whole time. That's Noemi wearing a floral top. This is actually a cafe in Hanam, which is a very upscale area with Comme des Garçons and things like that. And it's actually using bonanza beans, so beans from Berlin. I'm sitting outside Post Poetics, which is a very good bookstore there, although I think it's going out of business, alas. I think they've announced they're going to close possibly at the end of this month. Some slippers we bought. We love these kind of floral and patterned slippers, and the various arcades and what you'd call Shotengai in Japan, the market arcades they're all over Korea really, but always such fantastic riots of colour and form and shape. And look at these sweets. I mean, they look so great. They needn't be sweets. They could be funeral sweetmeats, or they could be new plastic gadgets or something. The books, obviously I can't understand what the books are, but I love the covers. That's Always August on the right. That's one of our favourite cafes, the best coffee. Some of the best coffee. That's inside the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, designed by the late Zaha Hadid, with very curvy feminine forms, I always think. And a lot of sort of design activity there, design stores, and everything is consumable. It's a very consumer-oriented society. This was a dress we got for like 50 cents or $1 or something in the market area, the Jongno area of Seoul, which is full of bargains. We like shops where they just have piles of clothes. I almost bought this very traditional costume, the paji as they call them, the baggy trousers worn by traditional Koreans at festival events. I didn't have 30,000 won on me, so I couldn't buy them, alas, but it would have made a splash in Tokyo, I think. That was a painting in an exhibition we just stumbled across of a cow. And it's a blaze of colour, which is something you can't really say about Japan. I think Japan's much more monochromatic and subtle. And speaking of Japan, here we are in Japan. We've now flown after a few days in Seoul to Kyoto, where I'm staying with Noemi in the apartment of my Ueda. And my Ueda later in the month is going to be in Paris in our apartment. So it's an apartment trade. This was Kyotography. The lady on the left side there is wearing as a hat the Kyotography catalogue, and Kyotography was an event, citywide event of photography, celebrating photography. I'm not a big fan of seeing photography on gallery walls, though. Somehow it doesn't really come alive. Even photographers that I really like someone whose name I've forgotten. Here I am standing on the street the very first day, looking down at the river the very first day. It's always refreshing to arrive. That's actually flying out of Seoul and flying into Osaka. Yeah, Rinko Kawachi was the name of the photographer I was trying to remember. We saw an exhibition of her stuff here in Kyoto, and it was all very badly printed and not as interesting as it looks in the books. The photography books actually make the work look much better. That's Hello Bibliothek, which is one of my old favourite cafes, although this time I wasn't too impressed with it. It was more like a bar than a cafe this time, probably because we went there at night, the first night actually. There I am with Mai on one of the bridges over the Kamo River, the Duck River. This is the Blue Bottle Cafe up near the temples in the Higashi area of Kyoto. And this is us sitting in the beautiful courtyard of that Blue Bottle. Sounds horrible in English, doesn't it, to call a cafe Blue Bottle as if it's full of flies, but it's actually one of the better chains, cafe chains. A kind of better version of Starbucks with much better coffee and single origins and things like that. But it turned out to be close to David Bowie's almost house, Togendo, which I made a whole video about. My last video was about searching that area for Togendo. Didn't actually find it, but it would be impossible because it's demolished now. It was demolished after I think Ryuichi Sakamoto owned it in about 2012, 2013. This is a walk we did up towards Kibunsha books and some sort of student-y stuff up there. Spectator magazine about subculture in 1976. I love how the Japanese hone in, especially in these MOOCs and these one-shot issue magazines, hone in on particular areas of culture with this great richness of detail. That's a cafe called Bastet, which is run by a Korean couple. A Taiwanese couple. And very tasty desserts and things. Again, it's near Kibunsha books, which I used to go to back in the teens, or the noughts even, Kibunsha books. And this is an old arcade up at Demachi Yanagi. It's a Popeye magazine from 20, 30 years ago, magazine for boys, city boys. They had lots of old magazines like Street, copies of Shoichi Aoki's magazine Street. This was kutsu, tabi kutsu. They're not actually divided toe tabi. They're just kind of workman's shoes, which I get for about $10 in workman's stores. This was a trip to Osaka we made, and Amagasaki, which is an area of arcades that I particularly love in Osaka. So I had to go back there. I used to frequent this rundown arcade in northwest Osaka. And came to love its shabbiness. It's actually a very Korean area as well. A lot of Koreans are here. And so you see kind of quite Korean-style arcade shops and things. This is called Emerald Famille, this pop-up. I'm sure the woman who runs that's Korean. Some of it's completely in desuetude. Some of the tunnels in the arcade have fallen into disrepair. That's the Umeda Sky building on the left. Which is a piece of postmodern architecture I enjoy. And these are back in Kyoto now. This is some of the arcades of Kyoto, the benches of Kyoto, the coffee of Kyoto. That's another branch of Blue Bottle. This is a laundromat which has a motif, a motto, "Be loved." I like that. I'm looking a bit sad though, suggesting people be loved. This is all the rundown kind of shops. Some of them closed, but they're often run by people in their 80s or even older on the arcades. It was very notable. We went to Imabari in Shikoku for about 10 days, and the main part of Imabari was an arcade which was completely deserted, apart from a couple of one very good cafe called Barrel Coffee, and some kind of community initiatives and gentrifying cafe type things. But because Imabari is such a car-oriented place, the pedestrian arcades are just not used at all. People go out to huge shopping malls like Aeon Mall and the outskirts. Butsudori, that was an exhibition at the Media Gallery in Kyoto. That's someone's postbox, the old style of Hinomaru flag postbox. And I just love all this sort of Showa period retro. This lady was very Showa. She was selling things in her garage next to her car. This Kumon by times Zizek meets Zizek, sorry, is fake. It's AI generated. But there were a series of, Hello Kitty explains Heidegger kind of things. This is an old issue of Kunal and more of the Shotengai architecture. Kyotography was actually using the Shotengai at Demachi Yanagi as an exhibition site. So these banners are actually part of Kyotography, which is finished now. Views of Kyoto, the touristic sites, we're mostly avoiding because the touristic areas are just a nightmare, a logistical nightmare. But some of it's inevitable because that's what you're in Kyoto for, the temples and the arcades in the center of town. This is there's always matsuris and things going on. This was an amazing cafe actually we found, which reminded me very much of, again, Athens in the late 60s or the early 70s. I think it had been there since then. Walking down various streets, and I love old blankets wrapped around fridges and stuff like that, as you can probably tell. We had some great weather when we first arrived, but everything's getting earlier. Like, we missed the blossom, we missed the cherry blossom season. We arrived in Golden Week pretty much, and had like 2 weeks of beautiful sunshine, and now it's almost already going into the rainy season. And I noticed down in Shikoku, in the more rural areas by the sea, the cicadas already coming out in mid-May, which is very early indeed. So you get the blossom earlier, you get the rainy season earlier, and you get the cicadas, who usually emerge after the rainy season, earlier as well. This is various glimpses of the trad architecture of Kyoto. Gion is kind of where we're staying, just on the eastern side of the Kamo River. But there are contemporary galleries and things. It's not all just tradition and retromania. That's an amazing neon sign for a Sento. It's so kind of inept that I love it. And some stuff from the more traditional arcades and things. That looks very much like Marimekko, but it's actually an artist in the media bookstore. And just sort of that actually on the right is part of the Kyotography. We love Kura Sushi, which is a very cheap chain of kind of drive-in sushi bars with conveyor belts. You go in and you get whatever you want to eat instantly because it's all paraded by you. But in Kyoto, they're not very central, so you really have to walk. We had to walk several hours to get to the outskirts, sufficient outskirts to have a Kura Sushi, but it was close to the Botanical Gardens, actually, that branch. Here's another edition of Popeye, this time Hello Tokyo. It's the most recent edition, Tokyo Special. This is the kind of old shop facades I love so much, especially in sunshine. They look very great. This was just before we left for Shikoku, which is also thanks to Mai Ueda, because she comes from there. She comes from Imabari, and the old family house is available to us as well, which is kind of wonderful. So we went down, and first of all we stopped in Onomichi, because that's a hillside port town on the Seto Inland Sea, which I love, and which is being redeveloped. I saw it in the late noughts first, and I was working as a curator for Loughborough, but it's something to do with the Olympics in Loughborough. I was supposed to curate a Japanese art exhibition, and they sent me out to Japan to meet artists and try and get some interesting stuff. So what you see here is an initiative on the main Shotengai in Onomichi, which involves various artists, local artists, and people from other places too, foreigners involved in it too. So we met this guy, what was his name again? I forget his name. Nut something, who's actually from Kyushu, and he showed us his studio, took us along the arcade to where he works, and he makes this very funky artwork. And we also climbed the hill and took a look at the views and things. The bicycle shot is us arriving after crossing the five bridges with Mai and her friend Hannah in their car. They took us from Onomichi across to Shikoku on these enormous road bridges which connect the islands and eventually lead to Imabari. And a very kind man gave us 2 bicycles. This guy on the left, he's a farmer up in the hills whose house was almost burned down recently. You can see the burned wood. This was amazing. There's so much forest fires and things due to global warming. And it came right up to the very edge of his property. But he gave us a couple of bikes to be mobile in this very road-oriented city. where you drive 20 minutes, a bit like the American style. You have to drive from one cafe, then 20 minutes to a bowling alley, then 20 minutes to a restaurant, then 20 minutes back home. And everything's a car trip, really. But we found this amazing cafe outside the town of Imabari, which was so sort of cutting edge, and yet it was in the middle of rice paddy fields. And this was actually a yard sale. Somebody on every Sunday basically is selling stuff from old people who've died, essentially, leaving this kind of junk, gold tape recorders and pottery and pretty much anything that would be in someone's house when they croaked. But I don't have the space in my luggage to bring home old tape recorders, unfortunately, otherwise I would have bought an old reel-to-reel from the 60s. This is the centre of Imabari, and it's opposite a very good little cafe bookshop called Mori. And some of the brickwork patterns of Imabari and shadows of the overhead cables and things. And the coffee from Barrel Coffee in a totally empty arcade where you can sit outside and be lucky to see a single person pass you. This is with Hannah and Noemi and Mai. And here we are up in the hills with some friends who are they remind me of some of the people I know in Berlin, actually, who left Berlin to go and live in the countryside and escape the city, but have some of the cutting-edge sensibility of, experimental alternative lifestyles, take that to the countryside. Again, there were matsuris right in the villagey part of Imabari we were staying in, by the sea, sort of in between the mountain and the sea, really. So this orange bread was amazing. It has sort of mikan built into the bread. Very delicious. Here we are having breakfast and drinking tea. Mai, of course, is a tea ceremony artist. That is her role now. But she had this amazing family house close to a Buddhist, to a shrine, actually, a Shinto shrine, which she took us to see, the local shrine, and the sea, to see the sea. But she's actually getting very much into Shinto. We went to another Shinto shrine, which had a young priest who was allowed us to stay there and listen to him playing the taiko drum and doing prayers and things, recitations. And Mai loved it so much that she took a recording and started practicing how to do those prayers, those Shinto prayers herself. Because really, when you think about it, the tea ceremony is quite Shinto. It's really influenced by Shinto and the appreciation of nature and of plants and of agriculture and of the cycles of agriculture and renovation of nature. That's the view from the Aeon Mall of the successive layers of mountains you see when you're in Shikoku. These jagged, small and yet big-looking mountains. You could almost swear they were like the Alps, although I don't think they're as tall as the Alps, but you see layer after layer of them. Unfortunately, they're always building roads in Shikoku, so we were riding bicycles around a lot of construction work for people building roads. There's very little public transport as well. They're basically buses. You might get one bus per hour to where you want to go. But the great thing is that once you're off the main roads, you can actually cycle in complete peace. There's very little traffic on the side roads, and so we got into this ritual of kind of going to see, basically shopping centres and see the Don Quixote, which is the big novelty store, or the restaurants clustered around it, or the 100 yen stores. But we did find some amazing things like this towel museum with mumins, exhibitions of mumins, because Imabari is famous for towel manufacture. We also saw a towel festival, and there was a huge towel visitor centre for any visiting towels coming along. And but we also saw just a lot of weird kind of agricultural machinery and strange, very beautiful fish and insects and birds, especially. A lot of birds really living. Kites are very Japanese. We had this terrible rainy day where we got soaked. We went to Matsuyama, which is the next city across southwest of Imabari, a bigger city actually. And we'd been told that there's a place called Mitsu, which is the old port town in Matsuyama rather. But it was so pouring with rain that we couldn't really enjoy it. We just took shelter in a cafe and bought this jacket. Naomi got a warm jacket, but we got drenched really right through to the socks and the skin, and ended up just having to walk up and down the arcades in the centre of town before getting our train back. In fact, we almost got the trains cancelled because of high winds and rain. This is the local metro system in Matsuyama, which was refreshing because actually Imabari hardly has a metro system at all. It has a couple of trains that cross the town. Kind of reminds me of Vietnam in that sense. But weirdly neglected city, full of old people, and not many cafes, but enough very good cafes. That is a top we bought. Actually, one of the other things on this deserted arcade is there are a couple of old ladies who sell kimonos and things who are hanging on for dear life. I don't know how much they sell because there's no foot traffic whatsoever. But we ended up buying some strange retro clothes. Actually, our favourite clothes shop is a place called Sagan, which was next to the Kura Sushi in Imabari. And that was, again, run by an 80-year-old man, but full of uniform military shirts and things like that, which we snapped up because they're all like 100 yen. And with the exchange rate just now, 100 yen is, it's, 60 euro cents. So just incredible bargains. In terms of the food, in terms of clothes, we kept thinking this is unbelievably cheap. It was actually cheaper about a year ago, to be honest. The yen was at its lowest point, and it's now gaining ground again. But it's still remarkably cheap if you're spending dollars or euros in Japan. Didn't used to be this kind of third world state. This is us with the bicycle. He had to replace the chain on this. He had to fix a puncture on this little bicycle. But the miracle was that Naomi learned to ride a bicycle, which she'd somehow neglected to do. I think over-anxious parents perhaps had made her think it was terribly dangerous, but it wasn't. It was a great place to learn, actually, because it wasn't dangerous in this town where there was no traffic. There's me with the large black bicycle I had, and this was actually the original Barrel Coffee, which was very good. That was a local restaurant, actually, which we loved. We found on the last day, pretty much, that we were there, but it was for the fishermen coming into the fishing port. We took a boat back from Shikoku to Kansai, and it was an overnight boat, actually very amazing. Got there at 6 a.m. to Osaka and went to see the exhibition site. Didn't go into the Expo 2025 because there were queues, and apparently even when you get into the site you have to just join endless queues, and then what you are rewarded with at the end of that is like an advert for somebody's country, video projection and some ad hoc architecture. We didn't fancy that, but I did want to see how the island had been developed, because it wasn't accessible before, this island where they built the expo. And they've extended the Chuo line out two more stops than I used to live at Osaka, so it was on the same line, and I would get a view out over those islands, some of which are artificial, reclaimed land, and others are actual islands. So this is us back in Kyoto. This is my baggy, almost an Australian look, I sometimes think, a kind of Australian colonial look. So here we are back in Kyoto, back at Keibunsha Books, and actually that looks a bit like Kobe. It looks a bit like the Kitano district of Kobe, but it's actually on the Philosopher's Walk. We did that battling the flies by the riverside and the tourists, of course, as well. Some nocturnal scenes, some local eccentric restaurants, eccentric Showa decoration. That's a crow, which is a paper crow used to frighten away real crows from garbage sacks, and some old retro window displays, a fig tree, amazingly in fruit under a bridge in a very interesting area, an arcade we found way south in Fushimi, in the Fushimi area. Various very rundown arcades, but not the Fushimi shrine, not the famous red mountain walk thing, but if you go even deeper into Fushimi area, again with these shops run by 80-year-olds. I love these textures of tiles and things. This is some lights in a pachinko arcade. This was a cafe in South Kyoto, which reminded us of a Korean cafe, actually. Some ceremonial socks, an amazing temple. We went to this restaurant called D&, Department, which is actually a kind of design store, but they have a shokudo, which is actually the best food we've had the whole trip. Really amazing, and such beautiful, comfortable surroundings in a temple grounds. So that comes highly recommended, and that brings us pretty much up to the moment. Thank you for your attention, and I'm off to see more of this Matsuri.
Open University.
From the start, we are dealing with enchantment, with spectacle masquerading as innocence, a soft, mute emissary of tourism. But what happens when the emissary begins to absorb the structures of meaning around him? When he performs irony without language? When he dances next to the ghost of David Bowie and feels nothing but purpose? Doing increasingly abstract things, wandering through a Kyoto museum, staring at a Rothko, holding a paperback of Barthes' mythologies, sitting in a cafe reading Mull, the island and its people, while sipping a juice box. He is not just a mascot, he is the gap in the mirror, the rupture where identity ought to be. There is no presence, only the trace of the present, haunted by its past. David Bowie, a ghost dancing with the echo. Misaki, the goddess of joyful semiotic collapse. And I am your tour guide through the simulated ruins. He plays a single mournful note on a melodica. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and support further lectures on our Patreon, where this month's bonus content includes: was Watership Down a metaphor for French structuralism? Kumamon reads Rimbaud. Joe Curry reviews the films of Jack Tati. Misaki Kawai, the interview, felt only. I am not a man. I am a concept in bear form.